Have you ever stopped and asked yourself why life would bring someone into your world with such force, such inexplicable intensity, only to make it impossible to stay with them? It's not just irony, it's almost cruel in its design. There you are, living your life, and suddenly someone appears, not like a soft breeze, but like a storm that unroots everything you thought you knew about yourself. You feel something ancient, something vast between you, like your soul recognizes theirs before your mind even has time to process what's happening. And just when that connection begins to settle into the rhythms of your everyday, life says no. Not now. Not like this. And you're left holding the ache of a bond that cannot unfold, a love that has nowhere to live. It's the kind of pain that doesn't scream. It lingers, quiet and persistent, tucked into the spaces between breaths. You may try to rationalize it, talk yourself out of it, distract your way through it. But some part of you knows this wasn't an illusion. It was real. And that's what makes it so hard to release. You see, we are taught to believe that real love should last, that deep connections are meant to be permanent. But sometimes, the people who stir your soul the most aren't meant to walk beside you for a lifetime. They're meant to awaken you. They arrive not to stay, but to set things in motion within you that you never would have touched otherwise. Carl Jung believed that these encounters rise from the unconscious, from the parts of ourselves that are yearning for change, for expansion, for truth. They're not logical. They don't always make sense, but they serve a deeper purpose. Think of it like this. You meet someone who somehow brings old dreams back to life, who makes you feel things you thought you had buried forever. Suddenly, wounds you thought had scarred over begin to ache again. Fears you forgot you had begin to whisper. You're not being undone by them. You're being revealed to yourself through them. They didn't cause your pain. They illuminated what was already inside of you, waiting to be seen. It's human to want to hold on to that kind of connection, to turn it into something safe and lasting. But another part of you, the part that knows, understands that this was never about possession. It was about transformation. Your heart wants to belong. Your mind wants to plan. But your soul, it wants to evolve. And evolution is often messy. It rarely happens in comfort. It tends to arrive in the form of a rupture, a break in the familiar, a moment where everything you thought you needed is stripped away so something deeper can emerge. The truth is, not every love story is meant to be lived out. Some are meant to be remembered. Some are meant to rewrite you from the inside out. We often think, if the universe really wanted me to grow, why not through something less painful? But real growth rarely happens in stillness. It needs fire. It needs longing. It needs the kind of heartbreak that pushes you into places you never would have gone by choice. That person you can't forget? They weren't a mistake. They were the flame. They were the messenger. They were the mirror that showed you not only your beauty, but also the places you'd gone numb, the parts of you still waiting to be lived. Their presence was a trigger for your awakening, not a promise of forever. Think of someone who spent years surviving, doing what was expected, playing small, avoiding risk. And then, one day, they meet someone who looks them in the eye and sees them. Not the version they show the world, but the raw, aching truth of who they are. In that moment, something inside them shatters. They feel alive again, hopeful. But when that person leaves, they're left with more than grief. They're left with a choice: to fall back asleep or to let that awakening guide the rest of their life. Jung said that meaningful encounters are like chemical reactions. If there's any real connection, both people are changed. You may think you've lost something because they're no longer here, but what you've gained is far more valuable: the spark of a new self. The self who dares to feel again, who dares to want more, who refuses to stay hidden. This doesn't mean you're broken for remembering them. It doesn't mean you're weak, because it still hurts. It means you're alive. It means you were touched by something real enough to rearrange your entire internal landscape. The universe doesn't play by the rules of fairness. It plays by the laws of soul. It brings people into your life not to complete you, but to reflect you. Not to offer safety, but to push you toward wholeness. And sometimes, the price of that wholeness is the very person who helped awaken it in you. That's the paradox. What feels like a loss is often a form of freedom. You think you're mourning them, but in truth, you're mourning the version of yourself you once were when they were close. You're grieving the possibility that you glimpsed, but never lived. And that grief is sacred, because it means something mattered. It means you have tasted something true. No, you might not ever fully forget them. Some people leave echoes so loud that even silence remembers their name, but you can choose what to do with those echoes. You can let them haunt you, or you can let them guide you. You can use what was awakened in you not as a chain, but as a compass. Let their impact become a seed that grows something beautiful. Let the pain be proof of how deeply you can love and how deeply you can live. They were never yours to keep, but they were yours to feel. And sometimes that feeling is the first step toward becoming someone new. Maybe the hardest part isn't losing them. Maybe it's learning to carry what they gave you without being able to give it back. It's waking up in the morning and realizing that the ache hasn't gone anywhere, only softened at the edges, made room for new breath. You still remember how they laughed, how they looked at you like they saw something others missed. But now, in their absence, you're left holding a kind of sacred responsibility, not to them, but to what their presence stirred awake inside you. You're not just grieving a person. You're grieving a mirror that showed you parts of yourself you never knew how to hold. And now that the mirror is gone, the work begins. The real work. To sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. To ask yourself, not, why did they leave, but what did they leave behind in me? Because the answer isn't in the past. It's in what you choose to do with what remains. Maybe they brought you face to face with your fear of being abandoned, your need to feel chosen, your hunger for someone to save you from yourself. Maybe they made you realize how much of your life had been built around survival rather than expression. Whatever it was, you can't unsee it now. You can't go back to pretending you don't feel what you feel. Some connections aren't meant to be healed through closure, but through transformation. The kind of transformation that doesn't ask for explanations or apologies, but simply demands honesty. Brutal, liberating honesty with yourself. You start to notice the patterns, the ways you silenced your own truth to keep the peace, the way you settled for less because deep down you didn't believe you were worthy of more. You see the compromises you made that never felt like choices, and suddenly the story you told yourself about love begins to unravel, not in bitterness, but in clarity, in quiet, aching truth. Jung often spoke about the shadow, the hidden self we deny, suppress, avoid. Sometimes love is the flashlight that shines straight into it. The person you couldn't keep might have been the one who illuminated your shadow so clearly that it burned. And yes, it's painful to look directly at the parts of you you've spent a lifetime trying to keep hidden. But it's also the beginning of freedom, because once you see it, you're no longer enslaved by it. You're finally able to name the fears, the needs, the shame that have been driving your choices, and in naming them, you reclaim your power. You start to realize that maybe this wasn't about losing a person. Maybe it was about losing an illusion. The illusion that someone else could complete you, that love had to look a certain way, that fulfillment could only come from being wanted. Their absence begins to feel less like a void and more like a clean slate, a space where you can build something not from longing, but from truth. And that truth doesn't always feel good. It feels raw. It feels naked. But it feels real. You begin to understand that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes, love is an earthquake. It shakes the foundation of everything false so that something unshakable can be born. So, you grieve, but you don't collapse. You mourn, but you also rise. And slowly, piece by piece, you begin to integrate what they awakened. Not as fantasy, not as memory, but as fuel. You let their presence become a doorway, not a prison. You let the pain become a teacher, not a sentence. You find beauty in the fact that something so brief could leave such a lasting mark. And in that, you discover the quiet kind of gratitude, the kind that doesn't deny the sadness, but sits with it like an old friend saying, "I'm glad I felt that. I'm glad I knew them." There will be days when it still hurts. That's okay. You'll pass a street, hear a song, taste something familiar, and they'll return, uninvited but not unwelcome. Let them visit. Let the memory pass through you like wind through an open window. You don't need to chase it or shut it out. You just need to remember, they were never here to complete your story. They were here to redirect it, to interrupt the cycle, to give you a glimpse of the life you could live if you stopped waiting to be saved and started saving yourself. The people we can't keep are often the ones who loved us loudest in the language of the soul, not always in words, not always in actions, but in what they touched, in what they disrupted, in what they left behind. And if you've been brave enough to let that disruption shake you awake, then you haven't lost them. You've honored them. You've let their purpose unfold. Maybe you still dream of them. Maybe part of you always will. But let that dream be a reminder of who you're becoming, not who you were when they found you. Let it remind you that you are no longer sleeping through your life, no longer hiding from your fire, no longer mistaking comfort for connection. And when that longing creeps in, instead of asking, "Why couldn't we be together?" ask, "What in me came alive because of them?" Because that's where the truth lives. That's where your power begins. And if someday someone new walks in and finds you standing in your truth, not desperate, not waiting, but whole, know that this was never just about the one who left. It was about the one who emerged from the ashes. You. So maybe they were a storm. Maybe they were a mirror. Maybe they were the match that lit the fuse. But above all, they were the signpost pointing you back to yourself. And that is a love worth remembering. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, don't let it end here. Share your story below, your ache, your awakening, your becoming. Sometimes the words we leave behind become someone else's map home. And if you're ready to keep walking the path of healing, clarity, and soul-led growth, subscribe and join us. There's more light to find, more truth to unearth, and more awakenings waiting. in the places you least expect.